A Georgia teacher who married her high school sweetheart is accused of sexually abusing one of her students. We're taking a closer look at this teacher's history within her rural community and the case with a board-certified psychiatrist. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, says a 25-year-old former teacher in rural South Georgia had sexual contact with a student, and that no matter what, it wasn't consensual. Chasity Knight, maiden name Chasity Denmark, was booked into the Toombs County Detention Center at the end of August, and she has been charged with one count of improper sexual contact by employee, agent, or foster parent, consent not a defense. As you can see, there's a very, very specific Georgia statute. And to give you kind of an idea of what it is, one version of it reads, quote, an employee or agent commits the offense of improper sexual contact by employer or agent in the first degree when such employer or agent knowingly engages in sexual explicit conduct with another person whom such employer or agent knows or reasonably should have known is contemporaneously, and one example, enrolled as a student at a school of which he or she is an employee or agent. So there's kind of that power dynamic there. Now, that was first degree. Second degree would exclude sexually explicit conduct. I have to tell you, at this point, we don't know exactly the specifics of what she's charged with, which degree it is. There's a lot of details we don't know. And by the way, depending upon the degree and the circumstances, the potential prison time can vary in certain cases. For example, first degree, in this case, with this statute, you could potentially be looking at 25 years in prison. But going back to Miss Knight, she was a teacher at Toombs County High School up until April of 2024 when the school board accepted her resignation. But here's the thing, they may not have known the true reason behind her quitting, or it may have been the reason for her to quit. I say that because in a statement, representatives for the Toombs County school system had said, quote, they had recently been notified by law enforcement of an investigation into an allegation that we had no prior knowledge of relating to a former employee being involved in an inappropriate relationship with a student. Okay. Now, investigators believe that she had sexual contact with a student back in January, although we don't know the child's age or gender since that information hasn't been released. Not surprising, sometimes in these cases it's sensitive information. Now, Knight is certified to teach agricultural education, and in 2021, she started her first full-time teaching job at Toombs High, her alma mater. Yes, that's right. Knight herself had attended Toombs High School, graduating in 2017. This is according to the school district. In fact, her social media pages show that she married her high school sweetheart, Stormy Knight, just a few years ago. Facebook posts seem to show that the two participated in FFA together, that's Future Farmers of America, showing livestock at shows during their high school years. In 2016, Knight, then with the last name Denmark, was apparently the Toombs County FFA vice president. Now, as she's gotten older, Knight has continued to work with this organization, leading groups of high schoolers. As recently as February, it's our understanding that Knight posted photos from an overnight trip to the Georgia Junior National Livestock Show. When she graduated from Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College in 2021, Knight apparently put a frame around her Facebook profile picture saying, I am proud to be a teacher. But officials say she used her position to abuse her power over one of her students. On August 19th, the Toombs County Sheriff's Office requested that the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, come in, take a look at this case. They had gotten a report of possible sexual abuse by a teacher with one or more students, so she was arrested shortly after. And for now, Knight only faces one count of improper sexual contact, and the GBI says once it finishes up its investigation, everything's going to be handed over to the Middle Judicial Circuit District Attorney's Office for prosecution. And also, I should tell you, for now, the Georgia Professional Standards Commission's website seems to show no ethics actions have been taken against Miss Knight. Hey, by the way, we want to thank you guys for coming to us here on Sidebar. One of the ways we like to do that is by introducing you to the sponsors that we have, because they offer incredible products and services that may really help you out, like Upside. So this is so cool. Upside is a free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. So if I pump my gas and I use Upside, I could potentially get cash back. Real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer straight into your bank account. So once you have the Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, all different kinds of places like Shell, 7-Eleven, Taco Bell, there's so many more. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card, you follow the steps in the app and you get paid. So to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen and use our promo code Sidebar and you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. So with all that in mind, I want to bring back in friend of the show, board-certified psychiatrist, Dr. Ziv Cohen, to talk more about this. Dr. Cohen, thanks so much for coming on.
Good to be here.
I, unfortunately, have been covering a lot of these cases with you, and I will start with the way that I always start, your reaction to this new allegation.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not surprised. So we've been talking about how these cases are becoming more and more common. And we've been having a discussion about whether, this is happening more and more often or whether we're just learning about it more. And, we don't have great data to differentiate between those two scenarios, but it's certainly my strong impression that it's happening more and more often. And this case fits the typology. It's a young woman. Often these teachers are on the younger side. They're immature. They don't have, in their mind, the boundary between them and their older adolescent students is blurred. And they can violate those boundaries and think it's harmless to get into a relationship with the student that can often be catalyzed also by social media, becoming friends on social media, or even sharing illicit pictures on social media. So I think just like with a lot of these cases, it'll be really interesting to see what the fact pattern is that emerges and what we learn. How did the grooming occur? Did the grooming occur through Snapchat or social media? And how quickly did it progress to sexual contact? There was another thing in this case that I thought was really interesting, which is that what we know about the case now suggests that the sexual relationship started 6 months or more ago, and that she was actually caught because of some kind of more recent contact with the individual. And so I think what that makes me think about is how in these cases where there's a female perpetrator, there often is this kind of persistence in the abuse and the kind of almost delusional belief on the part of the perpetrator that this is a real relationship. And we've seen perpetrators like this even after they're arrested or sentenced, and they're maybe sentenced to probation and the court is lenient on them, still try to reach out to the victim.
That's so interesting. I was going to ask you, and again, these are allegations. It's difficult for us to talk about it because there's so much we don't know. But generally speaking, do you see a difference in the motivations between a female educator abusing or allegedly abusing a student versus a male educator? I mean, I thought that point that you mentioned was interesting, how there seems to be a pattern of continuing it on and thinking it's a relationship. Is that different than male educators who are accused of this?
Well, male educators tend to have more than one victim, and male educators tend to fit more that classic paradigm of someone with a sexual perversion, what we call in psychiatry paraphilia. So this could be somebody who's a pedophile, and has a sexual preference for young, minor sexual partners. And those kinds of folks, we think of them more as the sort of classic sexual predator that could have more than one victim, that grooms the victim, and it's primarily about sex. Where in gratifying these kind of abnormal sexual urges that the predator has. But with the female perpetrators, the typology is that it's usually one victim, and that the perpetrator is kind of deluding herself that she has a relationship with this person, that the relationship might even be helpful for the student, helping the student feel more confident or to grow up, or that they're secretly in love and they're meant to be together. So I think that's often the difference. And so with female perpetrators, we often see this kind of fixation on one victim and this kind of persistence to that contact.
By the way, one of the things we do know is the statute. And as I said, it's very specific. So, and here it addresses the sexual contact between a student and a school official, but there are other categories in this statute. So example, you could be dealing with a victim who is a patient at a hospital, or someone who's detained by law enforcement, or someone who's admitted to a sensitive care facility. And the statute, in my view, seems to be about that power dynamic, that vulnerability. That was what I wanted to ask you about, is that do we see that play into these events a lot?
We do. And so I think that statute is actually a good statute, a well-written statute.
Yeah,
because
it is.
Because we've seen so many more and more of these cases, and I think that we do need well-crafted statutes that try to reinforce what should be obvious boundaries between educators and minors, between caregivers and their patients. And so to get back to your question, I think that the power dynamic is very important. When someone uses people who are in their charge to gratify their own sexual needs, it's indicating an abuse of power. Psychologically, certainly that person is using a psychological power they have over that individual to further their sexual aims, grooming and developing a sexual relationship. And it really allows the older party, the party with power, to manipulate and control the dynamic. And I think that that's what's very scary for parents.
Yeah.
And has to be taken very seriously. So I welcome that type of statute.
How does this impact the victim in this case? And we don't know, again, the age, the gender, but how does it usually impact victims in this case?
I think it varies from victim to victim, but I think that it's a very powerful experience to be.
And by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. I should be clear. Alleged victim, right? This is just an allegation at this point. There could be further charges. She hasn't been found guilty, but alleged victim in this case.
Sure. And to add to that, we don't know the age of the victim. So I'm going to make an assumption here, which is that the alleged victim is an adolescent male, because if you look at research, this is usually a younger female teacher up until around middle age. The female perpetrators are usually, early 20s to mid 40s. And the male victims are usually, 14 and up, 14 to 17. So I'm just going to make an educated guess that that's the age of the alleged victim. And I think that it has a profound effect because these boys are sexualized too early. They're having a sexual relationship with an adult woman. They're not mature enough to really process that experience. And it can really derail their normal development, the normal early sexual, psychosexual experiences, having your first kiss, holding hands with your girlfriend, having normal intimacy with someone your own age as part of your own psychological development. And sadly, we've seen some of these boys end up having long-term relationships with the perpetrator. Once the perpetrator has done her time and the boy has gained their majority, they're over 18, they seek out the perpetrator to have an ongoing relationship with them. So I think that's very sad. It's always very sad when someone ends up settling down with their abuser. And we see this in many contexts in the world of abuse, where people actually choose to be with their abuser. But I think that's a very poor outcome. So I think that parents are right to be worried that when they're bringing their boys to school, that this could happen. And I think schools have to do a lot more to educate and monitor their teachers.
You know what always shocks me about this? And here you have a situation, and these are allegations, but particularly people who are married and have a life. But assuming she did this, they have to know this is illegal, this is forbidden, it's dangerous. And yet that idea of keeping it secret, that idea of doing it, even though you could get caught, that that you're damaging the life of someone else. There are people, we cover this all the time, they don't care about the law. They'll do whatever they flout. But to keep it a secret, to live this double life, is that part of the allure of it? Does that add to this in a way when we try to understand why this is happening?
It can be, certainly. I think we could put this in the category of risky sexual behavior. And risky sexual behavior is something that does appeal to people. Again, usually it's more to men. You see a lot of men with sex addiction, and they like to engage in impulsive sexual behavior. And it can almost be likened to gambling, where you have men who are going to prostitutes and so on, and there's something that's really addictive to them about that risk and excitement about the unknown. So I think you certainly could have that parallel in this type of case. But I also think that, again, looking at her age, she's 25, and I do think that for these types of perpetrators, female perpetrators, often there's a blurring of lines for them. She may not regard herself as much older than her victim, and she might rationalize it. In psychiatry, one of the things that's come out in the last few years is this concept of emerging adulthood. And emerging adulthood refers to the fact that, 25 isn't as mature as it used to be. In the 50s, you hit 18, you're an adult, and you move out of your parents' house, and you've got to support yourself and so on. But now a lot of people are really financially dependent on their parents, and not fully independent and mature even into their early 30s. And so in psychiatry, we started to talk about how from the age of 18 to 32 is really a new stage of life that's developed in the last 25 years that we didn't have before, which is what we call emerging adulthood. And so if these allegations are true, again, one typology that we might fit this into is here you have a young teacher who's really in that phase of emerging adulthood. This might be her first job, right? She's 25, she finished college. This might be her first full-time job as a teacher. And she is not really mature enough. She doesn't have clear boundaries in her mind. She might be having some mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, whatever. And she's using something that's available to her. She can entice a student, which is probably pretty easy to do, right? The student's immature, doesn't have a lot of judgment, doesn't have a lot of life experience. She can entice the student to meet her own emotional and sexual needs. And so that is abuse. But I think that if we understand why the perpetrator might be at risk for that, it gives us a more clear sense of what schools can do to make sure that these boundaries are enforced.
Dr. Cohen, before I let you go, assuming she did this, assuming she gets prosecuted, assuming she's found guilty, assuming she goes to prison, do we see people who commit these crimes realistically actually rehabilitate? Do they change? Do they understand what they did? Can they function again in society? Should they be around children again? Do we see that level of rehabilitation?
We do. I think the question about whether any particular perpetrator can be around kids, again, is something that has to be scrutinized very carefully on a case-by-case basis. I think that a perpetrator, if these allegations are proven, should not casually be let around kids again, and there should be a lot of restrictions and a lot of time and treatment needs to pass before the person could be around kids. And I think it's also not unreasonable in a situation like this, again, if the allegations are proven true, to for all intents and purposes say, look, this person's teaching career is over. You're 25, you can go pursue a different career. This is not the career for you. But that having been said, if enough time passes and the person shows enough insight and remorse, and there's reason to believe that this was a real aberration for the perpetrator, one could imagine with close supervision that they might be able to go back and work with kids. But I think it's a real question mark. And I think that if so early in your career you have such a severe lapse of judgment as an educator, I think it really raises a question about whether that's the right career for that person.
Fair assessment there. Dr. Ziv Cohen, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.